we're offering a short invitation to buckle up, tune in, and respond. Today's sermon comes from a sermon contest, which is part of the Climate Justice Revival Weekend. Each of the winning sermons is provocative in asking us to consider changing in ways that promote a more just response in adapting to a changing climate. In the sermon we'll be sharing this morning, Reverend Molly Hausch Gordon is going to suggest, no, she's going to assert, that if we hope to have any sort of future at all, we are going to have to dismantle capitalism. Many of us may find that notion unsettling because capitalism has so shaped our world and our lives that it's almost impossible and pretty scary to imagine life without capitalism. It is not the whole of her sermon, but when she says it, you may squirm.
So, buckle up, but also tune in. Don't let that talk of ending capitalism or any of our current ways of life end your attention. Listen past it and around it. You'll also hear her talking about building community, finding beauty and joy, seeking justice, exercising generosity, being tender, and engaging in cathedral thinking. These ideas are just as important, and they all work together. So please tune in. Consider, there was a time when for many, the only beginning they could imagine was a world created over 7 days by a supernatural, anthropomorphized God. The notion of evolution seemed to threaten the foundation of that world, yet today it is evolution that offers a story rich with insight and wonder. As we gain knowledge and experience, our new understanding can point us to new ways that were once unimaginable.
And one of the real values of faith communities, especially UU communities, is that we can encounter challenging ideas together in the company of those we trust. This is a priceless value when it provides us with brave space to wrestle with the greatest challenges of our lifetimes. That's why we invite you to buckle up, tune in, and respond. If we're truly open to the possibility of our own evolution and growth, we have to respond in some way to messages that challenge our thinking. So we encourage you to ponder the ideas we'll be sharing in the sermon on your own and with each other. Acknowledge what in today's service makes you fearful or uncomfortable, and also think about where you could imagine new growth, joy, or hope. In this way, we can practice creating space to bravely encounter challenging ideas.
This past summer, in preparation for the Climate Justice Revival Weekend, the Unitarian Universalist Association sponsored a sermon contest. The 8 winning sermons were made available to be used by congregations in their own service planning. David and I read or listened to all 8 and selected one of them to share this morning. The sermon we'll be sharing was written by the Reverend Dr. Molly Hausch Gordon, pastor at the UU Church of Columbia in Missouri. Ironically, Byron and I have some very good friends from grad school who attend that church.
Just as ironically, this past May, while my wife Margaret and I were visiting Margaret's sister in Columbia, I attended this same church as a visitor. I didn't get to meet Reverend Molly that day. She was off to Pittsburgh Theological Seminary to receive her Doctor of Ministry degree in creative writing and public theology. But it seems serendipitous that the sermon that most resonated with both of us comes from a pastor at a UU congregation that both Katie and I have a passing connection to.
For those of you who don't know, there's another shared connection that David and I have. We're first cousins. My dad and David's mom were the youngest and closest of 8 siblings. Even though David's mom and family, my Aunt Carol, lived 5 hours away in Indiana, their family came to visit us and other family in Wisconsin every summer while growing up. I remember putting up our tent camper in their backyard one summer when our vacation took us their way.
I should admit, however, I didn't really know Katie all that well as a child. I was closer in age to her 3 older siblings, so even though we spent hours at their home every summer, the nearly 6 years difference in our ages as kids meant I barely knew her, until we both wound up here in the Twin Cities as adults, discovering that those 6 years didn't mean so much anymore, and discovering common core convictions that have made us family now in the richest of ways. So it's as first cousins, as family, that we're going to share Reverend Molly's message, which she titled, How to Survive the End of the World. Except for the final words that each of us will speak, all the words we're sharing are Reverend Molly's. So now we begin Reverend Dr. Molly Hausch Gordon's sermon, How to Survive the End of the World.
To survive the end of the world, stockpile seeds, water purifying tablets, and essential drugs. Learn first aid and how to shoot a gun or crossbow. Relearn the skills your ancestors had, like building shelters and starting fires. Travel with a diverse group with many varied skills, perspectives, hopes, memories. You'll need the children and the elders too. Find a defensible location with an adequate supply of water and good soil. Use the landscape that is left. Build community. Lean into community. Rely on each other. Include others.
Check the back seat for zombies before you get in the car. I think this may be a generational thing, but my friends and I have been half jokingly, half seriously plotting how to survive the zombie apocalypse for as long as I can remember. Over board games, over potluck dinners, over strong drinks. We're halfway serious because we saw when we were kids that nobody was going to save the rainforest or any of the rest of it. We're halfway joking because we understand instinctively what T.S. Eliot wrote at the end of his poem, The Hollow Men, which some of us had to read in AP English, where he writes, "This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper." It's not going to be as cataclysmic as total breakdown all at once. Apocalypse moves more slowly than that. It's always less obvious. In every zombie movie, only the truly alarmist notice what is happening before it's too late. Surviving is more like rooting down in community, less like fleeing to a remote castle.
We're halfway joking because in some ways what we face isn't new. The world is always ending somewhere, and another always being born. It ended on September 11th, 2001, during my last year of high school, and a new one began September 12th. It ended and began in your generation too. There have been worlds ending since humans could first conceive of a world. The world has been ending since the moment it began, and it has ended and begun in every age. Here is one good, true thing about that. We each hold personal and ancestral wisdom about how to survive the end of the world, because we've already been doing it.
We're halfway serious, because now when we say the world is ending, we mean something a bit more universal. We mean an actual crisis in the existence of life on Earth. We mean the 6th great extinction, which is more rapid or more complete than any in the ancient history of the earth, and which this time might include us. We mean that the climate catastrophe we learned about before we were old enough to doubt science is here. It's worse than we thought. It's happening faster than we imagined, and it is accelerating. And so, yes, we're serious about surviving the end of the world, but only as serious as we can afford to be while staying emotionally and spiritually intact. The world needs us to stay emotionally and spiritually intact. Our children's children need us to stay emotionally and spiritually intact.
I stand before you, the mother of 2 babies who will inherit the work we do in this moment. And so I want to tell you that I have no interest in despair and no time for fatalism. I'm here to grieve and feel my way through this with you, and I'm here to talk about adaptation and survival. Because the apocalypse is already unfolding in 100 different ways, and it has been. And what we do to build community and adapt and find beauty and joy matters for how it all continues to unfold.
One of the things I find myself doing most often in ministry is being present to the grief humans encounter when we truly understand that we cannot save the people we love. One of the beautiful truths I often witness is that when we own the truth of our helplessness and turn toward our grief, new possibilities almost always open up. In these times, we need to apply that productive grief to our relationship with the world. We cannot save the world, but we can find transforming ways to spend our soul on it and with it. To remain emotionally and spiritually intact in these times, we need to turn and face all that is being destroyed. We need to grieve and lament it in the depths of community. We need to sit in the rubble of it and pick up the pebbles and watch them fall through our fingers.
And we need to turn our face toward the sun, late in the afternoon sky though it may be. We need to attend to the beauty that is still here, the connection that never left, and the new life that springs up even in the midst of death, because the breakdown and the rebuilding are happening all at the same time, and must. Last week, local activist Rachel Taylor riffed on T.S. Eliot on Facebook in a reflection that I've been thinking about ever since, because it resonates so profoundly with my experience in this time of climate breakdown, while the forces of white supremacy and patriarchy and global capitalism are at once quietly crumbling and loudly reasserting themselves all around us. This is what Rachel wrote.
These are Rachel Taylor's words. Quote, "The real secret of the apocalypse is not that it comes with a bang or a whimper, but that it comes while you're doing other things. Taking the kids to school, paying the bills, going to see your friends play. All the stuff of normal life happens until it doesn't for you. But your neighbor still has to do the laundry and schlep his mom to the grocery store. So you try to keep going and take care of the things that are still working while also trying to fight injustice and stop genocide. You do what you can. Some days it's just surviving. Other days you can put your body between the machine and those more vulnerable than you. But you can't do that every day until you have to. The secret is that you don't get a break to build a better world. You have to do it while surviving in this one. You have to do it like a secret obsession, like a shameful hobby. You have to do it because it's exciting and dangerous and subversive and necessary. You have to share it with other Kingsters like yourself because you're not alone in this wanting, this desire, but you still have to do the dishes." End quote.
Life as we know it isn't ending exactly, not for those of us in this wealthy country. It's changing dramatically, but not entirely, and not all at once. And perhaps that is part of the problem, because it's life as we know it that got us here. Like a zombie virus, the apocalypse was planted like a seed in everything about the extractive economy that shaped our world and lives. It's been cropping up here and there. It's been lying dormant. But it's been riddling the whole world ever since someone first decided on the lifestyle of plunder. And we have to live in that world, fighting the zombie virus. Oh, by the way, the zombie virus is white supremacist, heteropatriarchal capitalism. It is the worldview that steals worth instead of respecting and multiplying it. We have to fight it in us and in everything that we love about our lives. We have to heal from it while living in it. We have to grow something new while we cut it back from its chokehold on our lives.
This morning's sermon takes its title from a podcast created by liberation activists Adrian and Autumn Brown, inspired by the scary, prescient, dystopian work of Black science fiction writer Octavia Butler. The Brown sisters set out to create a podcast that, quote, learns from apocalypse with grace and rigor, unquote. It takes seriously all of the things that are painfully ending and must end in our world, but takes equally seriously the things that we are birthing and growing to take their place. They have episodes on creating restorative justice practices in the midst of mass incarceration, embodied healing in the midst of white supremacy, rest and pleasure in the grind of capitalism, growing and preserving food in the midst of climate crisis, and more. Their point, and mine, is that if we are to survive, the world as we know it must end and is ending, and we are surviving its end and building and birthing the new all at once.
Joanna Macy identifies this moment as a decision point, when we will either enter the great unraveling or choose a great turning back to the earth and one another. Or, as the Climate Justice Collective Movement Generation puts it, the transition is happening. The question now is, will it be just? The world as we know it, the one that is ending and must end if we are to survive, is structured around what the Climate Justice Collective Movement Generation calls the extractive economy. This economy describes not just how money moves, but how our society is structured around extracting and controlling value, worth, and wealth from the earth's resources, including her people. All of the big systems of domination are built around this ethic, and after millennia of its perfection, we have no idea what a world without it would look like. In fact, there is a saying attributed to both philosophers Frederick Jameson and Slavoj Žižek: it is easier to imagine an end to the world than an end to capitalism. Our leaders seem to take them at their word.
But to survive the end of the world, we must not only imagine but actually live the end of capitalism. The trouble, of course, is that we have no idea how to do that. It is too big to fail, too assumed in our lives to even understand. It is simply reality, and so we must live in unreality. We don't know how, but we must do it anyway, or consent to a bigger, badder end to the world than we have ever known. Greta Thunberg tells us avoiding climate breakdown will require cathedral thinking. We must lay the foundation while we may not yet know exactly how to build the ceiling. Sometimes we simply just have to find a way. According to the Movement Generation Collective, a just transition will be one that moves us from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. Movement Generation suggests we make this transition by divesting from the extractive economy, starving and stopping its power by removing our cooperation while simultaneously investing in the regenerative economy, feeding and growing its power.
Often, I think the children are leading us in this time because they are not yet so indoctrinated into the way things have always been, and therefore must always be. They can still imagine otherwise. It is time to listen to the dreams of children and radicals, calling us to a just transition from the world that is ending to the world that can still be born if we act. The decision point we see unfolding now is the question of whether a few will succeed in doubling down on extracting wealth and worth from the earth and its peoples, or whether the many will awaken together into the work of shift, starving the structures of the extractive economy by investing in a regenerative economy focused toward sacredness and mutual thriving. As our fellow Colombian Rachel Taylor pointed out, the secret is that you don't get a break to build a better world. You have to do it while still surviving in this one. But here is another secret from the movement generation. The way we truly survive is by investing in all of the alternatives that starve the extractive economy. The way we truly survive is by finding small, daily ways to live the world we seek to create.
It is as simple and as difficult as that. Wherever you can, fight the extractive economy. Demand its dismantlement at the seats of power and find small daily ways to starve it where you live. And then, whenever you can, opt into deep community. That is how we survive. It is how life survives. We tear down walls, we grow roots for another way inside the world that is crumbling. So here is my not at all joking, totally serious list of how to survive the end of the world. Get to know your neighbors. Feed them. Let them feed you. Watch each other's kids, grandkids, pets. Develop the muscle of generosity like you are training for a giving ultra marathon. Share everything you can with anyone who asks, and ask for what you need.
Get in touch with your body. You will need it, and it knows things. Pay attention to what is happening below your neck. Tell the truth. Tell it to yourself first. Sit at the feet of your most vulnerable neighbors and your own most vulnerable places. They have the most to teach you about survival. Listen.
Remember your ancestors and the things they survived. Find the resilience that is your birthright and the courage that made way for your life. Practice taking risks. Show up in every struggle where someone is fighting for their dignity, because that is how we all survive. Learn about reparations and native sovereignty. Double down on exercising supremacy systems from your soul.
Learn to be tender. Refuse to be hardened. Let your heart be moved every damn time. Root in the place you are. Learn its history, learn its geography, learn its seasons. Sing a lot and dance. Make art, make love, rest luxuriously, eat pie. The world is ending and beginning now. We are surviving now. Let us love, let us connect, let us fight like hell for the dignity of each and all.
Because, as Katie and I have learned, family comes by more than birth. It comes also by shared conviction and by choice. Yes, we are all already family, but in the choosing to be family, in the choosing to be part of a congregation like ours, to be connected to one another and to the earth in the ways Reverend Molly suggests, we will discover not only how to survive the end of this world, but how to begin the birth of the next one.
And as David said at the beginning, buckle up. Buckle up indeed. I hope you managed to stay tuned in. I know I squirmed more than once every time I read the message, and again while sharing it this morning. And yet David and I felt this message carried a challenge worth wrestling with, as well as some seeds of inspiration and joy. So in the brave space that we create with one another, we truly encourage you to respond. Find someone at the end of our service or during the Sparklet Circle or even later, and tell them what in today's message stirred discomfort or fear, and also what stirred your imagination in the direction of hope. It is truly in the space between us, when we enter with courage and trust, that new worlds begin.
May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.